Hi everyone. My name is Abigail, and I'm 16 years old. Have you ever noticed how many smart devices are around us these days? Smart cars, smart vacuum cleaners, smart watches? Of course, they're super convenient to have around, but sometimes smart devices can turn out to be not just useful, but also dangerous. Subscribe to the channel, and then I'll tell you why you shouldn't trust your life to technology. My parents had always been fans of all sorts of smart devices. Our home could truthfully be called the home of the future. Everything inside it was completely automated. It kept track of the amount of food left in the house, and it even ordered delivery when we were running out of something. It turned on the lights when someone came into the room, opened the windows if it was too stuffy inside, not to mention all the other devices that were connected to the general network, and they all made our lives as comfortable as possible. Eve was the one running our house. That was the name of the artificial intelligence that looked after my family and who took care of all the household chores. You may be wondering where all that had come from. My parents actually designed everything themselves. My mom worked as a marketer for a large, high-tech company, and my dad was a software developer. For them, improving our home basically became their second job. Naturally, my brother and I quickly grew used to the modern technologies as well. I had a lot of electronic gadgets, and all of my 3-year-old brother Jeremy's toys were smart ones. I'm not gonna lie, it was super convenient. I could make myself a cup of coffee without even getting out of bed in the morning. I could just say, "Eve, make me a cappuccino." "It will be ready straight away," the artificial intelligence would reply. And 10 minutes later, the kitchen would already be smelling of freshly made coffee. We got so used to the technologies that eventually we stopped going outside at all. My parents worked from home, and if I needed anything, I just got delivery. However, if my eyes started to hurt from constantly staring at a monitor, I occasionally went outside for walks. It was on one such walk that I met Charlie. I was walking through the woods when my phone suddenly ran out of battery. I was left without a GPS, and I didn't know how to get back. I was starting to panic when I suddenly saw a guy about 18 years old riding a bicycle. He stopped and he asked me what was wrong. We got to talking, and he offered to walk me home so I wouldn't get lost again. We chatted merrily along the way, and he told me about his life. It was incredible. I hadn't thought there were still people like him around. The thing is, Charlie and his family used almost zero modern devices, and they lived with nature. Just imagine, he had a vintage cell phone with buttons. He hadn't heard of GPS at all. He was really amused that I'd somehow gotten lost in the woods, only a kilometer away from my home. He often rode his bike much further than that. Charlie liked going to a gorge to swim in the mountain river. When he told me about his adventures, I listened to him open-mouthed. After all, I'd only ever read stuff like that on the internet. I immediately wanted to try everything, too. Going on a real adventure, seeing wild animals, swimming in a river. Charlie said he would definitely arrange for that. We exchanged numbers and started chatting after that. Charlie had no internet access, so he would just call me on the phone, and then we'd meet in the woods at the place where I'd gotten lost. He showed me how to have fun without any modern technology. Eventually, I realized that life was a lot more interesting if you were not looking at it through a computer screen. However, my parents noticed that I'd started spending a lot of time outside as well. I tried to tell Mom and Dad how great it was to sometimes take a break and spend some time in nature. But my parents just laughed at me.
You can see whatever nature you want on the internet. And our smart air refresheners can fill the room with the smell of a real forest,
said my dad. I tried to convince them that taking walks sometimes was absolutely necessary. After all, it strengthens your muscles. But my mom gave me the excuse that a smart exercise machine could train my body without any effort on my side. This is the most advanced model yet. You can do sports without even getting out of bed, she said cheerfully. So, long story short, I could not get my parents to get out of our comfortable smart house and see what Charlie had shown me, the real world. They believed in modern technology so much, they couldn't even spend a single second without it. And then, I decided to go about this in what you might call a sneaky way. I wanted to convince my parents that even the most technologically advanced devices sometimes can make mistakes. And maybe completely entrusting them with your life wasn't the best solution. But I was gonna need help to do this, so I asked Charlie for it. He listened to my plan and happily agreed to help me play a little prank on my parents. I snuck Charlie into our house. He had to hide in the attic because there were no security cameras up there. And of course, my parents would not go up there. And so, from time to time, he would come down and walk around the house undetected. He opened the windows, turned on appliances, emptied our refrigerator, and naturally, after a while, my dad noticed that something wasn't completely right with our house. The AI wasn't behaving the way he'd programmed it to. Dad decided that Eve must be malfunctioning, and he started testing it. Of course, he didn't find anything wrong. However, Charlie didn't stop there. I taught him how to use all the devices in our house, and he began to drive my parents crazy. First, he would turn on the TV. My puzzled dad would rush over to turn it off, and while he was doing that, Charlie would run to start the washing machine in the bathroom. Since my mom knew she hadn't given the command for that, she started feeling uneasy as well. And then, when my surprised parents made it back to the living room, they'd be met with heated floors operating at full power. My dad decided that our smart house must have been hacked, and someone had to be controlling it via the internet. He began testing Eve once again, but still didn't find anything. My parents were getting more and more restless by the day. They didn't know what was going on in the house, and they started to think they were crazy. Charlie and I were just laughing at them, watching as they poked around in Eve's server, trying to find a problem. One day, my dad decided to turn off the AI controlling our house, and he almost caught on to me and Charlie.
What if there's somebody else in our house? Someone who's controlling everything?
He asked my mom. He rushed to watch the surveillance footage at once. But, of course, he didn't find anything, because I had already deleted all the videos Charlie appeared in. I had thought it all through. My plan was almost successful. I had convinced my parents that they shouldn't rely completely on technology. However, at that point, I made a mistake. I completely forgot about the nanny cam in my brother's room. When Charlie was again pulling a prank and turning on the lights in the whole house, Dad connected to the nanny cam and saw him. That was the end. He immediately rushed to the second floor, and he caught Charlie. He was infuriated.
I knew there was nothing wrong with our house. You're the one who's nearly driven us insane,
he shouted, holding Charlie up by the collar. I pleaded with my dad to let Charlie go, telling him it had all just been a joke. But he didn't listen to me, and instead said loudly,
Eve, call the police. We have an uninvited guest.
However, the artificial intelligence didn't listen to him. And this time, it wasn't Charlie or me doing anything. Eve was acting on its own.
I can't do that. The security system has been triggered, and during this time, no contact with law enforcement officers is permitted,
Eve replied. Suddenly, all of the windows and doors closed at once. Outside, the security shutters came down on the windows, locking us inside, making it so we could no longer leave.
Eve, what's going on?
My dad asked, startled. The house management system responded that it had studied the weather forecast and seen a severe storm approaching the city. So, for our safety, it had locked us in, and we wouldn't be able to leave until the storm was over. My dad didn't like that. He wanted to immediately disable the artificial intelligence and unlock the doors and windows. But all of a sudden, a hurricane really did hit our house. We could hear the wind howling outside. It was so scary. We were safe inside, but that didn't make us feel any calmer. I mean, how would you feel if you were locked in your home by a virtual assistant without your permission? I saw my mom and dad exchange a thoughtful look. We sat in the living room and waited for the storm to end. However, no sooner had my mom and dad picked up their laptops that the lights went out all over the house. My parents looked at each other, and then me. They were scared.
What just happened?
Asked my dad, but the AI controlling our house was silent.
A tree must have fallen over somewhere and taken out the electrical wires,
thought Charlie. So, what do we do now? Asked my mom anxiously. Charlie said that we just needed to wait until the storm was over, and once the repair team had fixed everything, the electricity would come on, then the computer, and then Eve would unlock the house. It was all very unusual for my parents. Nothing at home was working. They couldn't even make coffee because the coffee maker only listened to Eve. And we sat in the dark like that, anxious and uncomfortable. But Charlie was different. He jumped up and said he'd fix everything. Then he ran upstairs and returned with candles and some board games. He said that he'd found them while hiding in the attic. So we lit the candles and put the Monopoly on the table. My parents immediately cheered up and said they hadn't played that game since high school. We spent the whole evening like that. It was the most unusual evening of my life. We talked and forgot all about the internet, the smart gadgets, and modern technology. My parents got to know Charlie and realized that he really wasn't a bad guy. I confess that I'd been the one to come up with the prank, and I apologize for making them so nervous. But Charlie stood up for me and told them all about spending time in nature. My parents were fascinated by his stories, and for the first time, they realized that they really shouldn't completely entrust their lives to computers. In the morning, the electricity finally came back on. Eve said that the danger was over, and our smart home unlocked itself. Dad thought about it and decided that he would probably turn off the artificial intelligence. He didn't want to be nervous about a computer doing that ever again. While we were seeing Charlie off, we agreed that we would spend a whole day in nature without a single device together soon. I was so happy that I'd managed to change my parents' minds and get them interested in something other than technology. But I still have my doubts. Do you really think my mom and dad will change their minds when the internet lures them back in? What do you think? Please tell me in the comments below. How do you think this is gonna end?